The city buzzed with its usual Friday night rhythm, neon lights flickering against wet sidewalks as luxury cars slipped quietly past puddles, reflecting the towering skyline. Edward Langston sat in the back seat of his limousine, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He hated these charity galas, the endless parade of fake smiles and hollow applause. But tonight was for appearances. Billionaires didn't get to disappear just because they were tired of pretending. "Almost there, Mr. Langston," his driver said as the limousine pulled to a smooth stop in front of the Grand Aurelia Hotel. Cameras flashed beyond the velvet ropes. Journalists lined the entrance, desperate for a quote, a photo, anything. Edward adjusted his cufflinks and smoothed his tailored jacket, feeling the familiar armor settle over him. Tonight, like every other night, he would wear the mask. Polite, untouchable, perfect. He stepped out into the chaos, pausing just long enough for a few photographs before making his way toward the grand staircase. But just as he was about to climb the steps, a small figure darted into his peripheral vision. At first, Edward barely registered it. A kid, maybe 8 or 9, weaving clumsily through the crowd. His clothes were ragged, 2 sizes too small. His sneakers were so worn the toes poked out. In one grimy hand, he clutched a tattered backpack against his chest like a shield. The boy bumped into a security guard who barked at him to get lost. Edward watched, something tight and unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't pity. He didn't believe in pity. It was something deeper, something colder. The boy stumbled, nearly falling to his knees, but caught himself just in time. As he did, a thin silver chain slipped out from under his shirt, glinting under the streetlights. Edward's breath caught. It was the necklace. A simple piece, a slender chain with a small, worn pendant. But it wasn't the pendant that froze Edward in place. It was the engraving. He couldn't see it clearly from where he stood, but he didn't need to. He knew every line of it, because he had given that necklace to Claire 20 years ago. Panic surged through him, his polished composure shattering like glass. Without thinking, Edward pushed through the startled guests and hurried after the boy, who was now weaving into an alley beside the hotel. Ignoring the shouted protest behind him, Edward broke into a run, his heart pounding louder than the city noise. "Wait!" he called out. The boy turned, fear flashing across his dirt-smudged face. He backed away, clutching his backpack tighter, his wide eyes darting for an escape. Edward raised his hands in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I just need to see your necklace." The boy hesitated. A long, agonizing moment stretched between them. Finally, with a trembling hand, he lifted the pendant so it caught the light. Edward's knees nearly buckled. There, engraved in tiny, precise script, were the words he had whispered into Claire's ear the night he gave it to her. "Forever and always. E." His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He clenched them into fists, fighting the urge to fall to the ground. "Where did you get that?" he rasped. The boy's lips pressed into a hard, defensive line. "It was my mom's." Edward's throat closed. "Your mom? What was her name?" The boy's voice cracked as he answered. "Claire. Claire Morgan." The world tilted. Edward stumbled back, gripping the wall for support. His heart felt like it was being ripped apart, every beat a jagged, agonizing reminder of what he had lost. Claire, the only woman he had ever truly loved, and the woman he had abandoned for ambition, for the hollow promises of success. "Where is she?" Edward asked, though he was terrified of the answer. The boy lowered his head. His voice was barely a whisper. "She's gone. Gone." The word echoed in Edward's mind, a tolling bell of finality. Claire was gone, and in her place stood this boy, a living, breathing fragment of the life Edward had carelessly thrown away. He sank to his knees in the alley, heedless of the dirty puddles soaking into his trousers. His hands shook violently now, the shaking he couldn't stop even if he tried. The boy took a cautious step back, clearly torn between fear and the strange pull of the broken man in front of him. Edward looked up at him, tears blurring his vision. "What's your name, son?" he choked out. The boy hesitated, then spoke. "Liam." Liam. Edward let the name roll over him, a whispered prayer, a desperate plea for redemption. He knew in that instant that this wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. It was fate. Somehow, against all odds, the universe had given him one more chance to make things right. And this time, Edward Langston would not run away. Not from Liam, not from the truth, not from love. He would fight, with everything he had left, to earn the right to call this boy his son. The gala, the money, the reputation, none of it mattered anymore. Only Liam did, and Edward knew with a certainty that shook him to his core that he would move heaven and earth to give Liam the life he deserved, even if it destroyed him, even if it broke him completely, because some bonds, no matter how long they were lost, could never be severed, not by time, not by distance, not even by death. Edward rose slowly from the ground, wiping the grime from his knees, though his heart felt heavier than ever. Liam watched him warily, his body tense as a coiled spring, ready to bolt at any wrong move. "I won't hurt you," Edward said again, softer now, a rawness in his voice he couldn't mask. "You're not alone anymore." Liam's lips trembled, but he said nothing. "Come," Edward said, extending a hand toward him, trembling but steady with purpose. "You must be cold, hungry. Let me help you." The boy flinched at first, mistrust clouding his young eyes. Edward stayed perfectly still, waiting, praying. Slowly, hesitantly, Liam inched closer. His small, dirty hand hovered in the air before finally brushing against Edward's. A spark ignited between them, a fragile connection that neither fully understood, but both desperately needed. Edward closed his fingers gently around Liam's, as if holding something infinitely precious. Together, they stepped out of the dark alley and into the pulsing life of the city. A billionaire and a homeless boy bound by a past neither could escape and a future neither could predict. Edward led Liam toward his waiting limousine. The driver opened the door without question, though his eyebrows lifted slightly at the sight of the bedraggled boy. "Home," Edward instructed simply. Liam slid into the leather seat, his eyes wide with wonder and suspicion. As the car pulled away from the curb, Edward watched him carefully. "We'll get you some food," he said quietly. "Some clean clothes. A warm bed." Liam said nothing, just hugged his backpack closer. Edward's heart broke all over again. What kind of life had Liam lived, to be so wary, so ready to flee? He had so many questions, about Claire, about what had happened after he had walked away. But now was not the time. Now was the time to earn Liam's trust, one small act of kindness at a time. The limousine glided through the city, leaving behind the glittering gala, the flash of cameras, the empty applause. Ahead, the road stretched out, dark and uncertain. But for the first time in decades, Edward Langston wasn't afraid, because he wasn't walking it alone. He had Liam, and that changed everything. The limousine turned off the main roads, winding through quieter streets until it pulled up to the grand iron gates of Edward's estate. The gates opened silently, welcoming them into a world so far removed from the alleyways. Liam had known that he shrank back into the leather seat, clutching his backpack even tighter. Edward watched him with a careful eye. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're safe here." The car rolled up the circular driveway, stopping in front of the massive stone mansion bathed in warm golden lights. Footmen hurried to the door, but Edward waved them off. He opened the door himself and extended a hand to Liam. Liam hesitated, but slowly he stepped out, his sneakers scraping against the pristine driveway. The sheer size of the house seemed to overwhelm him. His eyes darted from the towering pillars to the massive wooden doors to the endless rows of windows, each glowing invitingly. It was another world, and Liam looked as if he didn't believe he belonged. Edward placed a reassuring hand on his small shoulder and guided him inside. The warmth of the entry hall washed over them. Marble floors gleamed under the chandelier's soft light, and the faint smell of fresh bread and cinnamon floated from the kitchen. Mark, Edward's butler of 15 years, approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Welcome home, sir," he said smoothly. His gaze flicked briefly to Liam, but trained in discretion, he said nothing more. "Prepare a guest room," Edward said, "and bring some food, something simple." Mark nodded and vanished down the hall. Edward led Liam to a cozy sitting room off the main hall, one with thick rugs and a roaring fireplace. He sat down on one of the couches and gestured for Liam to do the same. The boy perched stiffly on the edge of the cushion, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to come and throw him out. "You can relax," Edward said, forcing a smile. "This is your home now, too." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and fear. A maid appeared moments later with a tray of sandwiches, soup, and milk. Liam hesitated, then seeing no protest, devoured the food with a hunger that made Edward's chest ache. When the meal was done, Edward leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Liam," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something." The boy froze, his shoulders tensing. "You said your mother's name was Claire Morgan." Liam nodded, a wary look in his eyes. Did she ever mention your father?" Liam's face closed off. He set down his glass carefully, as if bracing for something painful. "She said he left," he whispered. "She said he didn't know. That if he did, maybe things would have been different." Edward felt the words like knives to the gut. She never told you who he was?" Liam shook his head. Edward leaned back, running a trembling hand through his hair. Claire had protected him, even after he had broken her heart. "She said he was someone important," Liam added softly. "Someone who would have cared." Edward closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the wave of guilt and grief threatening to pull him under. "She was right," he said at last, his voice breaking. "I would have." Liam looked at him, confusion and something almost like hope flickering across his face. "I think," Edward swallowed hard, "I think I'm your father, Liam." The words seemed to hang between them, too heavy, too big to fit into the room. Liam stared at him, silent, searching. Then slowly, he reached into the pocket of his backpack and pulled out a worn envelope. "She told me to keep this," he said, holding it out. Edward took it with shaking hands. He recognized the handwriting immediately, Claire's neat looping script. With reverence, he opened it. Inside was a letter that Claire had written, never knowing if it would find its way to him. "Edward, if you're reading this, it means Liam has found you. I never wanted you to know like this. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was scared. Scared of what it would do to you, to him. You had dreams, and I didn't want to be the one to hold you back. But know this, he is yours. He always has been, and he is the best thing I ever did. Please, if you can, love him, protect him. He's so much like you, so strong, so stubborn, so full of life. Forgive me for not telling you sooner. I just wanted him to have the best chance. All my love, Claire." Tears blurred the words until Edward could barely see them. He pressed the letter to his chest, as if he could somehow hold Claire again through the paper, through the years. When he looked up, Liam was watching him, his small face open, vulnerable, terrified. Edward opened his arms, and Liam, after a long, breathless moment, flew into them. Edward held his son for the first time, his body racked with silent sob, his heart breaking and healing all at once. This was it, the miracle he didn't deserve, the second chance he had prayed for without even knowing it, and he would not waste it. Not for anything. Edward woke early the next morning, before the sunrise could paint its golden strokes across the marble floors. For a moment, he lay there listening to the quiet hum of the house, and then, like a thunderclap through his chest, he remembered. Liam. He sat up immediately and made his way down the hallway to the guest suite where Liam slept. Pushing the door open gently, he saw the small figure curled up under a thick blanket, the necklace glinting softly against his chest even as he slept. Edward leaned against the doorframe, overwhelmed by the sight. So fragile, so brave. A boy who had endured far more than any child should, alone, until fate had brought him to Edward's doorstep. And now, there was no going back. He would be Liam's father, in every way that mattered. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Liam ate mechanically, barely speaking. Edward didn't press him. He knew trust wasn't earned overnight, not after the life Liam had lived. Afterward, Edward knelt beside him, leveling their eyes. "Liam," he said, steady and sure, "would you come with me?" "There's something I want to show you." Liam hesitated, but then slowly he nodded. Edward led him out to the gardens, acres of trees, flowers, and winding paths that once felt so empty. They walked in silence for a while, until they reached a small gazebo overlooking a pond. Edward stopped. "This was supposed to be for my family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For the life I thought I'd never have." Liam shuffled his feet, uncertain. Edward turned to him, kneeling once more. "I want you to have it. I want you to have everything." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside, a simple gold ring, set with a modest, shimmering diamond. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just real. "This belonged to my mother," Edward said. "She gave it to me for the family I'd build one day. I never thought I'd have anyone to give it to." He slipped the chain off his own neck and attached the ring to it. "But now," he whispered, his hands trembling, "I want you to wear it. Not because you need anything from me, not because of money or a name, but because you're my son, my family." He held out the chain. For a long moment, Liam just stared at it, then tears filling his wide brown eyes. He stepped forward and allowed Edward to slip it over his head. The ring rested against the pendant from Claire, the two pieces catching the morning light, bound together. Liam threw his arms around Edward's neck and clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, and Edward held him as tightly as he dared, feeling the boy's small, broken heart beating against his own. "I've got you," Edward whispered into his hair. "I've got you, Liam. I'm never letting you go." The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Edward called his lawyers, ensuring that Liam would be legally recognized as his heir. He arranged for tutors not just to catch Liam up on law schooling, but to give him the kind of education that would let him choose any future he wanted. He canceled business meetings, postponed deals worth millions. For the first time in his life, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the boy who now rode on his shoulders through the orchard, laughing like he'd forgotten the pain of the past. There were nightmares, of course. Nights when Liam woke screaming, trapped in memories of cold alleys and empty hunger. Edward would rush to his side, pulling him close, whispering words of comfort until the fear ebbed away. He never once told Liam to be strong or tough it out. He simply stayed, because that, he realized, was what love was. Not grand gestures or impossible promises, just staying, again and again. One night, months later, as Edward tucked Liam into bed, the boy reached up and tugged his hand. "Dad?" The word hit Edward like a punch and a kiss all at once. He blinked hard against the sudden sting in his eyes. "Yeah, son?" Liam smiled, small and shy. "I'm glad I found you." Edward swallowed past the lump in his throat. "No," he said softly, "I'm the lucky one." And in the golden glow of the bedside lamp, with the night whispering gently at the windows, Edward Langston, the man who once thought he had everything, finally understood what it meant to be rich. It wasn't the millions. It wasn't the houses or the accolades. It was this boy, this love, this second chance. The past would always carry its scars. Nothing could erase the years lost. But the future, their future, stretched out ahead of them, vast and bright and waiting to be written. Together, forever and always, just like he had once promised.